We have Julia with us tonight. Some of y'all may know her. Those of you don't. This is Julia Sarmiento Cohen. And so we met. I was actually texting her last night because I'm like, when was that? She's like, it was 2000, which I don't know how someone's brain does. Mine can't log timeline like that. So we met in 2000.
Yep.
So Adrian back there is a good friend of mine and connected us back when you were at Ybor campus at HCC.
HCC.
So I'm going to give a sketch a little bit. I'll do a little like intro here, but then I'm going to hand it to you to like flesh it out because this is like a little of your like bio resume type LinkedIn or whatever.
Sure.
But for so you know who we're talking to tonight. Julia's degree is in English and in American literature. And of course, then she goes on to get a master's degree because that's just how she does things. And she got that in educational leadership, both from USF.
Yep.
So fully a bull. And then in 2006, she actually, so during that master's, began her teaching career at the Hillsborough County Public Schools. She began teaching English and television production, which is super interesting to me, and then has worked her way up and throughout the district to the position she holds today. She's currently what's called the Resiliency, Character, and Life Skills Education Supervisor in the Division of Academic Services for the Hillsborough County Public School
Good job,
system.
John.
I read it. I have notes.
Kudos to John.
I have notes. But that's a mouthful, but also words, all of which are very interesting and intriguing to me, and I'm super excited to unpack some of that. She also serves on a bunch of different boards, several organizations working toward goals like affordable housing in rural communities, economic development, advocating for social and emotional learning in schools, and as well as raising up female Hispanic leaders. She's received a bunch of different awards for her leadership, her dedication to the community. So let's see, some of those. Ida S. Baker Diversity Educator of the Year Award. That's from the school system, correct?
Yep.
Ole, which is Outstanding Latina in Education Award from USF. The Dorothy Duke Outstanding Community Service Award, and the Florida Home Partnership and District Leader of the Year Award from the Hillsborough Association of School Administrators. Actually, she won that
Man,
a couple.
that person sounds awesome, doesn't she?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I want to know that person.
Correct. And one of the reasons that we're doing this is we want to know that person too. And one of the important things about these fireside chats is we hear all of these accolades and these awards and these accomplishments, and it's really common for a lot of us to go, how could I ever? How could I ever do that? How could I ever accomplish that? And so, well, let me pause there a little bit because I want you to flesh this out a little more. But like, I want to end. So, end of the bio was raised in Wimauma, Florida.
Yep.
Married with 2 children.
Yep.
And so I actually, after you kind of reframe or frame however you like, I want to kind of delve back into the early days, because one of the things I hope to do with everybody is to go, we have stories like one another. There's developmental paths that we take where we can hear in your story maybe something that resonates with us and know that we can maybe do some of those things as well. But
Absolutely.
Let me just pause and hand it over to you to kind of frame yourself beyond the like professional bio, however you like.
Well, thank you so much, John. I love that person. Sometimes I'm like, who is that person, right?
It's good that you love that person.
I do. Sometimes it's a struggle, but I think sometimes with the titles and the accolades, when you're not looking for it, they happen organically. I think some people are striving to have the notoriety, the certificate, the thing that says I'm important, or they need the titles or these things to validate them. And I am ambitious. I've always been a very ambitious person. People who know me from very young to, my mom will tell you, if she told me no, I couldn't do something, I'm going to figure out a way to, do it, But I think that some of the accolades and the things that come along with it, when you're not doing it with yourself in mind, that's when the accolades come, and they happen organically. And I think some people really strive for those titles, but those aren't things that I worked for. It wasn't things that I was looking for. It's great, but
It makes a dope resume.
Yeah,
it's
it really
like
does. That's why I'm like,
pages
man,
long.
she's pretty awesome. And sometimes I think I forget that how I had this conversation earlier is that you're your own worst enemy sometimes. And for me, people would never probably realize it, but I am like, sometimes I try to self-sabotage, and I will also be that person that is super hard on themselves. Like, I'm not doing enough, I could be doing better, but I think it comes from having, and going back to that background and being from Waimama, is having two parents that didn't have the opportunities that I had. And, you know, some of those opportunities were taken away from them. Like, I think that in our country, we have several opportunities, and some people don't take advantage of them. And I had a father that came here from Mexico that had an elementary education, a mom that had a high school education, and my mom probably would never even remember some of the stories that she tells me, but it's something that she always wanted to do. My mom is a learner. My mom was always someone that wanted to do the things that people told her she couldn't do. And both of my parents ended up becoming entrepreneurs, owned their own businesses, are very well respected in our communities. And I think that's why I had so much pride and just so much, the will and the drive comes from that. And it just comes naturally. And some people have parents that didn't have a struggle. They didn't have, kind of things were kind of handed to them, or it was a lot easier for them. And I have always seen the struggle of where we are and how they tried to always give us better, whatever better is, right? Whatever that better is. And I've always used that. So I think a lot of where my ambition comes from is just from watching what was modeled for me.
All right, so talk to me as best you can remember, as far back as you can remember, like young Julia. Like, so were you were raised in Waimama? Were you born there?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I was born in Bradenton, but we lived in Waimama my
That's
whole
where
life.
you came up,
Yep,
basically.
I
Okay,
was
good.
raised in Waimama.
So, and then you've got these parents that you described, the circumstances, the entrepreneurship, what you saw. Like, how far back can you remember? And can you just tell us about those early days? Tell me about your childhood.
So I always find it interesting that when you grow up, you didn't realize that you were poor until you grow up and go, wow, we were in that category. But I would have never known it. There were days that the lights went out. We didn't know how we were going to have groceries. Sometimes there was holes in our trailer, like we grew up in a trailer. But I grew up in such a loving environment and never wanted for anything. Whether maybe in the background, it was a struggle for my mom and dad, but I would have never known it. So this idea, I knew that others had more than I did when it came to like materialistic things, but when it came to what I've always thought was important is that family and being able to have conversations and knowing that I had two people at home that cared about me. I, grew up, my parents were married for 39 years before my father passed away in 2004. And that's all I knew. All I knew was a two-parent home. I didn't know anything different. And watching them get through struggles were some of the things that I remember. I remember my mom had her own salon, and my dad, she's a female and working from home, right? And most of her clients were male. So
The salon is at the house?
Yeah, and
Yep,
the salon
okay.
was at our house because my dad wanted to make sure that mom was there to watch the kiddos, right? They found ways to do things that I'm like, gosh, both of us leave the house, or we can't make it work nowadays, but they figured it out. But family and making sure that someone was there with us when we came home was always important. And I remember my mom cutting hair, and my dad would sit like on a wall on the other side. And she probably knew or didn't know, but my dad would just sit there just to make sure everything was good, making sure that the clients weren't, flirting or being disrespectful. But I always remember the unit between them, that if, no family is perfect, but I will tell you that growing up, I remember if there was ever a struggle, if there was ever something we needed to get through, my parents always found a way to push forward.
Now, you said that he was also, so we have a picture of your mom's kind of business that she's
Yes.
building. You said that they were both entrepreneurs.
Yep.
And so far, Dad's just sitting on a wall watching Mom, like clocking these clients. So, like, what?
Because he built his, he was able to watch my mom.
What's Pops doing?
So my father owned his own sprinkler business, and I don't know exactly what years, probably like late 70s, early 80s that I can remember, and I was born in the early 80s. So, but I remember my father being so well respected in the community. I mean, people that had money, people that had no money, people knew who my father was. People respected him, people knew who he was. They were always willing to help him with anything. And my dad was a worker. My dad was a hard worker. I can remember days where I didn't see him all day long. And I remember vividly 7, 8-year-old Julia, Dad would come home and I'm taking off his boots, and I'm taking off his socks and watching him sit there kind of just like unwind from the day, where I look at some of the things that I see now in society where it was like, I would have never, I will never, why do I have to take off my father's boots? But for me, it was almost like I knew what he was doing for us all day long. And that, to just remove his boots for him was almost like, it's a vivid memory that I have that stuck out. So when I think when people look at me and they see some of the things that I've accomplished, I know that I owe it all to what was modeled in my home.
I'm really, so we'll get to kind of what you're doing today, but it's very curious to me to tie that to your own upbringing and childhood a little bit. I'm sure you tap into some of this a lot. But like, when did your own pathway start to become clear to you? Like, were you young and going, I'm going to be an educator, I'm gonna be doing character and resiliency.
Wanted no part of kids.
I'm gonna go work for the district. Like what? Yeah, right.
I remember.
What did you
my
like?
mom,
What is it? The earliest like I'm gonna be. What were you gonna be? And then how did we get like?
So funny. I remember telling my mom, and I'm looking at my mom right now. I always told her I never wanted kids. I'm like, I don't want any. They're bad. I don't want any bad kids.
She does love you though.
I know. I do totally love my children, but I was the opposite. And then I remember, my brother growing up was like, I want to have a football team. Like, I want to have 5-on-5, playing against each other. But I was the complete opposite. But I think going back to remembering what I wanted to do had nothing to do with education. Not even a little bit. I was in high school.
Were you good at school?
It was so easy. School is easy.
Yeah, totally. It was so easy. Right?
I mean, people would never believe this, but I found out really quickly that some of my friends weren't exactly in I hate sometimes in education when we have all these titles, but you have your honors classes and your AP classes, and this kid is already on track to go to Harvard and college and this way and that way, and we label kids so early.
Yeah, ours was boom boom.
Yeah,
That's what.
I wanted
that's
to
what
be.
Our label was.
I wanted the boom boom classes because that's where my friends were, right?
Yeah.
My friends were in the boom boom classes.
I mean, those kids suck less. generally.
I was like, why? They're getting all this easy
kids.
work. This is what I want. This is my lane. So, being in education now, I knew my counselor knew that I was lying. But I vividly remember in high school, my freshman year, I was in all AP honors classes, on track to go the college route. And I just remember going to my counselor and saying, these classes are too hard for me. They're too hard. I can't do this work. And she's looking at me and I'm like, I just can't. My mom will sign this paper because I love my mom, but I'd be like, Mom, I'd go to her at 6 a.m. Mom, you need to sign this paper for me, And
it's a field trip.
Yeah, it's how I got my learner's permit. I told my kids the other day, she didn't even know I was in driver's ed. She just trusted me so much. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, look how that turned out.
I know. Look at me now, right? But I wanted to be with my friends who were not in those courses, and not realizing it, it kind of put me behind, quote unquote. But look where I am now. I'm like, it didn't really do anything. I just wanted to be with people who I felt looked like me, were like me. I was in classes with people who didn't look like me, who didn't think like me, who had more money than me, and I felt out of place in those, higher achieving academic classes. So I dumbed myself down. I knew what I was doing, and I got through high school that way, and then once senior year came around, it was like, what are you going to do with your life? And all my high achieving friends were like, Julia, what do you mean you haven't applied for colleges? What do you mean you haven't done the FAFSA? What do you mean you haven't? And I'm like, I guess I better get on it. So, and I had my brother also, Adrian, we're only like 18 months apart, who I had as a resource. And so I started at HCC, which everyone was like, oh my gosh, you're not going to a university first? You're so...
It's definitely the move.
Yeah, I'm like, why are you not doing this?
It's definitely the move.
So, but I learned a lot through that, but that's kind of like how it was. I had no intention, there was nothing in my background that said I want to be in education, I want to, be with kids or anything like that. It just kind of happened organically. And then the TV production thing happened actually at Ybor campus when I realized...
You were doing that in college?
I was doing it in college. I started working at the radio station. I ended up having like this, oh God, so embarrassing now. Don't go look for it on the internet. I'm sure it's there, but don't do it. But, I had like a public access, girl show, that would come on.
Do we have these recordings?
Let's
My
not.
God, we got to get these.
I'm sure they're somewhere, but we're going to leave them hidden in the vault.
No, we're not.
somewhere.
We're going to find them.
We're not
Jobs.
finding them.
Everybody find these. Share these.
And then I just realized that just naturally...
Can you, real quick, no, I got to interrupt.
Yeah,
Can you just do, because you were the host?
Yeah, I had a co-host.
And you naturally remember the, welcome to the, you remember that? Yeah, can you just give us a little taste real quick?
Because you guys, I don't know if how old everyone is, but there used to be the Man Show on MTV where
is that the Ziggy Zaggy guys?
I don't even remember. Yeah. But that's kind of what we mimicked it after. We were going to talk about all these female issues and all of that. And it was welcome to the Girls Show. Who's our first caller? What do you want to talk about? And it was hi, Julie, I see you. And I'm like, oh gosh, someone
in the window.
Someone recognized me from school or whatever. But
it was called the Girls Show.
It was called the Girls Show. And that's when I kind of realized that people were actually paying attention to me. We might talk about this the whole time. It was weird. I just found my badge. In looking for, because everybody has goals and I have goals, and kind of this whole thing kind of led me to wanting to set another goal. But I started looking in my old trunks and stuff for things, and I actually found my badge from public access that, I was a director, I was a floor director, I was audio, all of those things. I actually applied to UCF and got into their film and radio program and turned it down.
What?
For a boy to stay at USF. That, they offered me more money, of course, and that's the excuse that I used. But I stayed back for a boy. And then I totally hated the mass comm program at USF.
That was your undergrad, right?
That was my undergrad. And mass communications happened by accident because I went there, I got into UCF to go to film school. I put my deposit down to go and get my apartment. And then I just totally shifted and stayed at USF. And I hated their mass communications program. And then I ended up looking at, by the time I was finished with my 4 years, they're like, you have enough for a lit degree? For some reason, you like to read, apparently, and take all these literature classes. And you actually have a minor in mass
English
comm.
and American lit.
Check. So they're like, you have enough to graduate with this degree. And then I'm kind of like, cool, what can I do with it? I don't know what I can do with this now. I got to lie to my parents and tell them that this was my plan the whole time. What's going on?
Obviously.
So that's kind of how it was. And teaching was one of them. And actually, one of my brothers found a loophole of hey, you could become a teacher if you take these courses. from the state and do all this. And I'm like, teaching, I'm like, you don't have to go through college of education. You didn't have to do a lot of those things. But then I'm like, I'm graduated, I'm broke. Yeah, I think I'll teach.
So, okay, wait a minute. This is very interesting to me. So, like, you're just kind of like, well, I'm gonna do radio show and film, and then there's this boy, and then I'm like, oh, I'm at school, and I took this major, and it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I can graduate here. Oh, wait, I can get paid for, like, teaching. Okay, and so you literally end up in education.
Yes.
Completely happenstance.
Yep.
Okay, but then you go to a master's degree in educational leadership, so something happens.
So I find out like I'm a really good teacher, and it's so
I'm
funny.
really good at this.
And
Turns out I'm smart.
I'm pretty good at it. And it's so great that I actually see one of my former students here, one of my favorite students, and she was actually become a very good friend that's here. But I ended up loving teaching, and I found out that I was good at it. So like a lot of the books that most kids don't like to read, like no one cares about Shakespeare anymore. No one cares about To Kill a Mockingbird. No one cares about all these books, but I loved it. So when I started teaching, and I had my minor in mass communications, so when Leonard High School opened in 2006, it was a brand new high school. A principal, Mr. Denios, he probably had a bunch of other applicants and was like, I guess she fits because, you know, I have to, now that I know education, it's like, oh, she has a pulse, hire her. You know, and she's young. So it just so happened that half of the teaching day was TV production and the other half was English. So it just was like a natural fit. And I didn't know what I was doing. Of course I lied. Have you ever worked in a $500,000 studio and worked with, of course I can. You know, so that's how I ended up teaching. And just, oh, I really messed my first group of kids up, poor babies. But that's how I ended up teaching and getting into that realm.
Do you remember, like, okay, you're like, oh, turns out I was good at this. Turns out I enjoyed this. Do you remember, like, that as a realization? Like, so you walk in to teach, it's your first day, you haven't done this, you're probably not feeling super comfortable with it. There's some point at which something changes where you're like, man, I actually have a knack. I connect with these kids. I like this material.
Yeah.
Is there a moment?
Yeah. Well, it happened within my first year teaching. I realized I taught in the neighborhood where I grew up. So these were students and families that we knew each other. They knew my family. I knew their families. There was kind of like an instant trust. And I wasn't the Spanish teacher. There wasn't the stereotype of someone who is Hispanic or Latina that speaks Spanish that they're teaching Spanish. They're like, no, I'm teaching a required course. You have to pass my class to graduate. And it kind of hit my students differently as well, that they saw someone that looked like them that wasn't doing the typical jobs that they would normally see Hispanic people doing at a school site. And I realized that when I was teaching, they were listening, they were engaged, my scores were off the charts. I made a lot of people upset. I think I was just telling my husband this story the other day. I didn't want to teach To Kill a Mockingbird. I didn't want to teach some of these, classics. I wanted to teach different books, and one of the books I ended up teaching my freshman year was Farewell to Manzanar, which is about the internment camps of what we had with Chinese American internment camps.
Okay.
And
I don't know that book at all.
Yeah, you should.
I'm like, oh,
Very
I'm
good.
not educated.
But my kids were so involved in it. They wanted to learn. They couldn't believe that in our own country we
There's
did
so
some
many
of these
people
things.
that are oblivious of this history.
Yeah. So I remember I got in trouble from my department head because I didn't ask permission. And if you know me, anyone who knows me, I'm like, oh, okay, my bad. What is it? Ask for forgiveness and permission.
Like
it's better to ask for
motto of my life.
forgiveness.
Yeah.
So, but I just realized that I was someone that the kids were listening to. I enjoyed being with them. I enjoyed seeing that they knew that there was something beyond just what they were seeing in the Ruskin Waimama area. That, higher education or a career was available to them. So I'm like super proud of so many of my students that, especially on that mass comm route, I have kids that work at ESPN. I have students now that are producing music videos for Bad Bunny, like all of these things. And they're telling me, they're like, I would have never done this had I not had you as a teacher.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How good does that feel?
It's the bucket filler.
So, okay. So you end up in teaching, you realize I have a knack for this. That probably leads you to go back for this master's degree to go like, I need to like excel in kind of leadership here. Now, really your brother and you, to me, have been a interesting pair of people that I've known.
I hear that in the school system too.
Well, here's the thing is I've always been a very outside. So you talked about like, oh, you didn't get permission. I've always been a very outside the system person.
Yeah.
And Adrian's gotten this more from me than you because I wasn't ready to like go duke it out with you. But like the idea of working in the system seemed insane to me.
Yeah.
It just seemed insane. It's like, no, you build another system. And to this day, that's a little of my flow. I'm a very outside the system person where I'm like, I don't know how you can exist in that institution,
Yep.
within that system, within that bureaucracy where they're at, you need permission and where this kind of thing is playing out. And yet, one of the main reasons I want to talk to you, you're someone who I've watched go a long period of time, stay within the exact same system, have a lot of the same convictions and values, and kind of like bang from within, which like, I'm just curious, I'm sure that lands enough for you to understand what I'm asking, like
Absolutely.
in terms of like
Absolutely.
that experience of doing that from within and then rising to the position that you're at today. Tell us that story.
So I think what has helped me, and I think it's hilarious that people in the district will always ask if my brother and I are married. And then I just ask them, have you looked at us? Like, really looked at us together? And they're like, oh, you're brother and sister. Like, yes, we look identical. Like, we're not married. But everyone will hear us speak and talk about whatever it is that we're passionate about. And they're like, oh my gosh, you sound just like your brother. Or, oh my gosh, you sound just like your sister. But our ways of getting to the things that we want are totally different. Like, my brother would go insane if he had the job that I had. He's just like, I couldn't do it. I can't do it. I don't know how you do it. And I guess I know that God has given me a lot of influence. He's put me in positions where relationships matter. And I think even the job that I lead, I know that building relationships is critical. And there are a lot of people making decisions for our kids and people that look like us that know nothing about where our kids come from, what they're dealing with. They're just looking at numbers on a chart. Mm-hmm. And you have to finesse it, but in what I do now, and I started doing this in about 2015, it's when I went to get my master's and left, is there was a specific position called Social Emotional Learning Coordinator. And when I really understood what that meant, it was learning how to manage your emotions, learning how to build relationships, make better decisions. And having that job and learning so much about it made me understand that, oh, this is really how Jesus functioned. Jesus was compassionate. Jesus was empathetic. Jesus didn't have to get loud. I mean, a couple times he flipped some tables, right? But I'm like, this is God's work. I'm like, you're calling it all these things like self-management, empathy, compassion. And more than anything, when people say, you need God in schools and you can't pray and you can't do all these things. And I'm like, oh, it's just semantics. I'm like, you're exactly teaching what God was telling us to do, what Jesus was telling us to do. And now you're giving me permission to do it. So I use your language, I use your words, but I can't name a more compassionate person than Jesus. And the work that I was being asked to lead was to teach our kids and adults how to be self-aware, understand who you are, and to self-manage. And let me tell you, people get stuck there. The next three parts of it are being able to have social awareness, build healthy relationships, and make good decisions. Let me tell you, if that is not in a nutshell what we are trying, what people are lacking in the world, and it's the most important thing. You ask any employer, I can teach you the content, I can teach you how to push buttons and do all this, but can I teach you to be kind? Can I teach you to be compassionate? Can I teach you to be empathetic? Can I teach you to make good decisions on the spot? Like, are you that person? And it's called social emotional learning, life skills, 21st century skills, resiliency education, whatever you want to call it. But I felt like that job didn't exist before 2015 in Florida, like in nowhere.
Okay, so I'm very curious about this. So
Yeah.
that was like when it came into being. Do you know why that came into being? Because it is a little fascinating. Because by the way, as
Yeah.
you're talking about these, like you're banging out these like bullets of what this is, I'm like, that's all any of us need to develop in. Like
Yeah.
if you can get that figured out, the rest of this is just
Cake.
Google.
Yeah.
Like it's like you could do the rest of this
Yeah.
with a little like education in terms of facts is another thing entirely, but like emotional self-awareness, emotional control, behavior, like being able to like manage yourself, have real healthy relationships that have existing boundaries. Those kind of things are like, none of us are good at that.
And it's hard. It's hard work, and I have always said it's a skill. It is a skill to be able to self-manage and manage your emotions and, you know, the fix your face syndrome, right? That's what, you know, people tell me I have sometimes is like, fix your face, Julia. We know what you're really thinking. But it's a skill just like anything. Like math is important, science is important, all of those skills and algebra, and they build upon each other. But understanding who you are, there's work there. Who am I? What bothers me? What are my triggers? What are the things that I know that I stand for? Where am I getting my morals and who am I getting my morals and values from? Being able to self-manage. When do I, raise my hand to talk? When do I know when to, you know what? This isn't the right time for me to speak. Let me walk away real quick. Being socially aware, not just butting into conversations when people are talking. Like, no one really teaches you that. It's just an assumption that you're learning it somewhere.
You know who teaches you that? The people that punch you in the mouth.
Yeah.
That's literally
legit,
the only people
legit.
that are actually actively
Legit.
teaching that. It's like, well, I hope he gets punched in the mouth and learns that lesson.
How about you don't say that again, right? But no one's teaching that. So that's where it kind of first started, where, there's so much research over the, like, in 1960s and 70s that, leads us to where we are now. But then, of course, you get into politics and semantics and name games. And probably a few years ago, SEL or social emotional learning became like a dirty word because
Why?
Because it was more people aligned it towards, you're trying to teach my child what to think, like what morals, what values, like that should be taught at home. I should be able to teach them that. And making good decisions and healthy decisions, the parents should do that. That would be awesome if we were in a utopian environment.
It would be awesome if parents were doing that, though.
They can't even do it themselves. So, like, and I know that after COVID, there was this really big push for the mental health. Like, a lot of our kids were isolated for so long. Like, my son did e-learning at home for a whole year, and you kept hearing the word mental health, and that became like there's a stigma around that. So semantics came into play, and it's like, well, we're not going to call it SEL, we're going to call it resiliency. We're going to make it a nice word that we all can be okay with. And for me, I don't care what you call it. I could care less if we call it resiliency, we call it life skills. You gave me permission, because now we have standards in the state of Florida with our governor that this was his big push, and now you're mandating that we teach these things. And it's under a different name, it's under a different brand, and I understood why, because not everyone that came out of COVID, they were resilient. They were able to push through. Some of these kids didn't have any issues with that. Adults didn't have any issues with that. That's great. That's some people. But there are a lot of people that need that extra support. And it's okay to say that you need that support.
Yeah, totally.
But labeling that all kids need this and all kids need a therapist and all kids need, all of these things, that's where kind of the push came. So after they figured out their word game, I'm like, so at the end of the day, I still get to do what I'm doing? You're calling it something different? Let's keep rolling.
All right, so one of the, even as we titled what we were talking about relationship and resilience as a subject, and this is at the heart of a lot of the work you do. And you said there was a transition from social emotional, which obviously pertains to relationship.
Yeah.
And they moved that into the language of resilience, which, by the way, to me personally is the core shit I want to talk about. I'm just the most interested in how to make it, how to last, how to keep going, how to go through hard times, whatever. And there's a lot of, and I'm just curious, what would you say are, talk to us about the building blocks of the actual lessons, the actual work, the actual principles, the actual, what makes for resiliency, and then how is relational health related, and
all the
let's
good
go.
stuff.
Let's go.
Let's
Just
go
get on
there.
get on the soapbox and let's
go
do
there.
it.
So resiliency, I think that at some level, failure and struggle is okay. I think that we have kind of cradled a lot of the cradle generation. We don't want any, me included. You don't want your kids to fail. You don't want to see them struggle. You don't want them to cry.
So, by the way, this is cliche, but so you're talking about eighth place trophies and stuff
yeah,
like that?
Oh yeah, everybody gets a ribbon. Everybody gets all,
That's probably not
no
helpful.
feelings. Yeah, no, probably
okay,
not.
all right, go on.
They got to learn. And it took us a long time to realize that, not everybody gets a trophy. You're going to fail in life. There are, and it's from those failures that you learn how are you going to move forward from this? Am I going to give up? Am I going to lay down? Or am I going to, keep going forward? And that's where the part of it being a skill. Some people don't know how to move forward from, or how to bounce back. Everyone assumes that, everyone is at that level, but they're not. And I think that's where having relationships is critical, because I have friend, and I see my cousin here that's Gabriella, that I have different friends that help me. I have relationships that, my spiritual friend who I know is going to give me my good, godly, spiritual, advice, and I have that relationship. And then I have my hardcore friend that is going to be like, no, girl, that is not for you. Say no, walk away. They deserve to get cussed out, and I have that friend that's going to keep it real with me. But I have noticed that in these generations is that building authentic relationships and understanding why you're building them, a lot of people don't have that. They're scared to share their emotions. They're scared of, not being understood or being misunderstood. So just being able to teach why relationships matter, and even in family dynamics. I love my family, but I always say you don't get to pick you get to pick your family, right? But
no, that's obvious.
You don't get to pick your family, but there's also things that you've learned that maybe were potentially not the best growing up and how to handle situations, but being able to understand the difference, that just because I was raised this way doesn't mean that I have to continue it, and I have to raise my, children that way, knowing that the relationships that I have and the relationships that I want to build with my children might look a little different from what I was raised with. But in school and even right now, how I have moved up, how I have been able to, I think, tolerate a system like this, I will tell you, because it's hard. You have to hold your tongue a lot, and some people wonder how I do it on a daily basis, because when I go home, I probably just unleash it all out because I'm suppressing it all day long. But
he's like, never.
He's like, never.
That's totally fine.
But I have learned that it's not about me, and I'm speaking for a bigger audience. So me having that outburst or proving my point or being right hurts a whole group of people. So just being able to understand how to build relationships to get what you need, and that's a skill, and not everybody's good at it.
All right, so this might not pertain exactly to the relationships in the professional setting, but like there's something that strikes me in what you're saying that seems to be related to relationships. I feel like there was something you said, but I can't exactly quote it, but like, I feel like a lot of times we end up in, let's just say, less than healthy relationships because of our inability to, one, know ourselves, have some authenticity, and tell the truth. And that's often related to fear of not being accepted, creating anger in the other person. And so this could be related to our family, this could be related to the professional environment,
100%.
but like there's something at some raw material level that I feel like is a real lesson for every human being, period, in the room, like of just like telling the truth.
Yeah.
The difference, the way I've always framed this might not be language you use, but I've always talked about like the difference of being nice and being kind. Like nice is often dishonest, but kindness, like it's like telling the truth, but like in love and in kindness, as opposed to like, you know, expressing things like boundaries, expressing things like, hey,
Yes.
that's not appropriate or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
and I think like somehow this is connected.
Absolutely.
The ability to do that in a one-off relationship is somehow connected to our ability to like be resilient at large.
No, and that's where having it and teaching students and teaching young people how to create healthy relationships and have healthy boundaries. That's like a new concept. And then when you hear people say they're like, oh, okay, there you go with all your little, college or your whatever new book you read kind of thing, and they dismiss you. But when you really are trying to build healthy relationships, sometimes you got to let some people go. I mean, there's a time and a place and there's people that are in your life for a season, and you thank them for that season. But I have also learned with building relationships, my time and who has access to it, it's important to me. I have a family now. I'm not by myself. So if I'm creating space and time with you, that it's not often that I do that. There's reasons why I have certain relationships, but they make me better. I think sometimes we're drawn to people who are going to always tell us what we want to hear, and that can become unhealthy. You need you need to have the person that's going to tell you you're wrong. But no,
Tough love it is.
But I think that's where the relationship part comes in. I can be that honest with someone because they know that I love them.
Okay, so I want to connect this to being in an institution, because this is a genuine, like, John has questions.
Yes, I love it, John.
Because it sounds like you said, sometimes I have to keep quiet. Sometimes I have to go with the flow. Sometimes I have to bite my tongue. And John thinks sometimes I need to
flip a table,
burn it down.
Yeah.
And that's been a bit of the oil and water that feels like within the system. How do you navigate with integrity the political or the tactical movement in those relationships that are professional, that are institutional, that are bureaucratic, and retain authenticity, boundaries? Like, how are you navigating that space?
I think what has helped me is that people probably would never believe this, but I'm very quiet at work. I'm very quiet. I'm very into what I'm doing at the moment. I'm at the task at hand. I'm not the gossiper at work. I'm not the one that's sitting there. If something's happening and I don't care. If it has nothing to do with what I'm doing, I'm not involved in it. So even when I'm in meetings, I don't talk just to talk. There are people that I want you to see me. I want you to know how smart I am. I want you to know that I know the answer, and that, you know what, just because you have a master's and I don't, I'm going to show you how smart I am. That has a lot to do with knowing who you are, so you probably need to check yourself. But nobody wants to do that. But I think in being almost 10 years at the district level, and it really hit me because that anniversary was just a couple of days ago, is that
Your anniversary.
my anniversary at the district, I've been with Hillsborough Schools for going on year 18, but at the district level, almost 10 years, and it hit me, and I'm like, wow, I'm getting old.
That's
Oh.
also, okay, so, I'm getting old. That's like, whatever, that's cute. But like longevity in vocation
I got
is
12 more years till I hit 30, it's fine.
wildly impressive, honestly.
But I think the key and what has helped me personally is that I'm not talking just to talk. If I'm speaking up in a meeting or if I am pushing back on something, because I'm not the person that always has to be right or always has to be heard, people around are like, all right, well, I'm gonna listen to her a little bit more now. Because she doesn't usually say much. Or if I'm very quiet, or if
You're not clamoring
If
for
I'm
attention.
not-
You're like, yeah.
and my facial expressions is something that I've tried my whole life. Anybody who's worked with me, they're just like, Julia, it's all here, what's going on? And I've even been in meetings with my own superintendent, and after meetings, he's like, what are you really thinking? And I'm like, why, what's wrong? He's like, Julia, be honest
When you say
with me."
my own superintendent, this is
Yeah.
Addison? This is like the,
Our current one,
oh wait, he was replaced.
Yeah, yep, our current.
I'm not up to date.
Yeah.
Who's the new one?
Superintendent Van Ayers.
I was like, oh yeah. Van
Yeah,
Ayers took
Van.
over a couple years
Might
ago.
have saw him
okay.
on the news yesterday because we're very mad at the county commission right now. But yeah, so, but even that will tell you the relationships that I have built with people. That my body language will show it, my face will show it, and I've tried, but they want your opinion because they know that you're not, I don't have an agenda. A lot of people have an agenda.
I mean,
I just want to help. I mean, I really want the best. What's out there? I guess my agenda is a
that
little
is an
different.
agenda.
That
like,
is an
I was
agenda.
like, yeah, like, I don't have an agenda is not
But
exactly.
it isn't an agenda.
I don't have a
for
political
Julia.
agenda. I don't have a personal agenda. I don't
Yeah,
have a political
it's not
agenda.
a Julia agenda.
I
ever.
have a ultimate agenda. I have
Yeah.
like a where the vision for the world that we want to live in agenda.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But
that
it-
resonates.
I think people also know that with the relationships that I have, if I wanted to, yeah, I could be making more money. I could be, have higher titles, but the titles don't mean anything to me. I want to have enjoyment in what I'm doing and the work that I'm leading. And I know sometimes right now, especially with laws and things that are happening, it's not always fun, but I always ask God, I'm like, Lord, am I supposed to be here? Tell me when to clock out, because I'm ready to clock out. And so far, he hasn't told me to clock out yet, which I ask him like all the time, are you sure? Are you sure it's not my time? Are you sure it's not my time?
All right,
So-
I have a handful of questions that I want to ask everybody, and I want to run through those, and I want to leave some time for Q&A so you guys can start thinking about things that I didn't get to and things that you want to hear. But before we get into that, I guess just like in your day-to-day, in the role that you're in, like, can you give us like just some specifics around like what that means in terms of like, okay, I'm working with these schools, we're doing these programs, we're working with these populations. Like, yeah, just give us a little like detailed orientation on your actual role.
So the other day, my son asked me, he goes, Mom, if you could do any job, what would it be? And it wasn't my job now. I gave him, I'm like, I would travel the world and get paid to eat and stay at places for free.
I would be a food
Like,
commentator.
that would
That's
be
what's
my
up.
job. And he's just like, well, then why don't you do that? And I'm like, there's just so many reasons why I can't do that. But he got me to thinking that the day-to-day that I have now has me very far removed from students, that that's what gets harder. So I mentor kids. I work with the Hillsborough Education Foundation, and I have a mentee because I feel like if I don't keep that pulse of what kids are really going through, I mean, I have my own teenager. I have my own daughter who's getting ready to go into middle school. But you have to keep that pulse and never forget that you were once that teacher there. And sometimes the higher you move up, you make these decisions, but you're not remembering that the teacher has 7 different preps. They got this, they got that. They're a single parent. They're going through all these things. So my day-to-day lately has been more having to trust other people on my team to do their jobs, and I'm doing the contracts, the negotiating, the speaking in front of the board to get the money for the programs. And so I'm kind of like the program manager and managing all of it, and my team is implementing a lot of the programs. And I think sometimes because I don't get to see, like when you're a teacher, you get to see the instant aha.
Yeah.
They get it, they know, they love it, you know it. It takes a while for me to see it, and I have to see it in the programs that I lead with what's happening at the school. The discipline is going down. Parents are showing up to the school. The kids are, want to come to school. They don't feel like it's a burden to them. And the stories that my teachers and my principals tell me, that's what keeps me going. And that's kind of like what my day-to-day is, getting everything done, getting the contract signed, making sure they have what they need, troubleshooting things from behind the scenes. I also, this is another, I also oversee student success coaches, which is a job I held for a few years, and my brother held that job for a few years. And they are working with our students that this is it. Like, I'm your coach. You might not make it through high school if we don't get this together.
So my understanding of that would be like, and I know this isn't probably the language you guys use, but like I was like, it's dropout prevention.
Dropout prevention.
Yeah.
Yeah. Success coach sounds nicer though.
It sounds nicer.
Yeah, we're gonna.
But I was like,
finesse
that
it.
means
Yeah, you don't want a letter to
like,
come home
hang
and be
in there,
like,
bud.
like your kids in my
We're gonna
dropout
figure this
prevention
out.
program. They're with a success coach. We're here for success.
I feel you.
You see the semantics and the language?
It's good. It's a good choice.
Wordplay.
It's a good choice. But I'm like, is that the same as what
Totally
I think
dropout
it is?
prevention.
Okay.
So yeah, so I oversee that too. But what are 9 times out of 10 the students that we're working with in the Success Coach program? They're making bad decisions. They don't know how to manage their emotions. Conflict resolution. That guy deserves to get punched in the face. All of these things that, when they say the real world, and I'm like, no, honey, when you do that, you go to jail. Like, it's gonna happen. So if we don't work on it now, we know what's gonna happen. We know where the statistics are showing us. So.
All right, so I want to ask you a handful of questions. You can take as long with them as you want.
Okay.
So, what is the thing that you're most proud of in work or in just life in general?
Wow, that's hard. So I think I'm most proud of my kids and my family. I have a pretty awesome family. We may not always get along, like every other family has problems, but we're very loyal to each other, almost to a fault, right? But I know my family, we're good people, we have good hearts, we have different ways of navigating and getting to the places that we want to be, but I am most proud of how I have been able to successfully, I'm going to knock on wood, support my own children with some of the things that they struggle with, and trying to talk more to them, and my family, my husband, and I think they're my biggest accomplishment is my family. And I think I'm also most proud of that I can be an example for other people, because I came from my mama, and up until a few years ago, nobody cared about my mama. They were condemning houses and trailers, and now you got lagoons out there, and everybody's like, ooh, this is nice real estate, gentrification galore. But I'm proud. At one point in my life I wasn't, but I am super proud to say that's where I started, but you can evolve and it's okay. And you don't have to feel bad if you leave your neighborhood or any of those things, but I'm proud that I can be that example for other people.
Can you tell us a story, work-related, any point in your career,
Okay.
at any point, of something that blew up in your face and how you handled it?
So I will go back to 2010. I was actually in the middle of a separation. I was married at the time, and I kind of shut down when that marriage was falling apart. I still had students. I was still teaching. What blew up in my face was I didn't care about work.
That makes perfect sense.
I-
When the bottom falls out of your life, it's very hard to
stopped
deal with.
calling in.
Yeah.
And it just sucked because my brother worked there too. So they're like bothering him, like, so is Julia gonna come today?
Where's this at, bro?
And they're like, is Julia coming to work? And I just remember my APC at the time called me, didn't ask how I was doing. Obviously, I never missed a day of work. I was always on time, was always that teacher that would do anything and everything. And I just remember hanging up on her. She was like, are you coming to work? And I'm like, no.
Bitch, bye.
And I hung up. And I'm like, I probably don't have a job anymore. I don't know. But I could have cared less because emotionally I was not in the right headspace. But what brought me out of that, and I will never forget this, they're such a group of students, and one of them is here, it's so hilarious, is they're the ones, they started writing me letters, and they started giving them to my brother.
Students were writing you letters.
My students are writing me letters. They gave them to my brother, and they brought balloons, and they were like putting them in my mailbox and bringing them to my house. And they had a project that was due, which actually was like a book about their life that we were working on. And people were like, I need you to grade my chapters. Like, when are you coming back? We miss you. And they were the ones that brought me out of it. And I just remember one day going, this is bigger than me. I know I'm going through what I'm going through, but there's a whole group of kids that need me right now. And that's what kind of pulled me out of it.
You know what? This is like tangential, but earlier you mentioned like Jesus being an important part of your model in your life, and then as you tell that story, it reminded me of the story of St. Francis, who was a Jesus dude, and like he was a saint.
He's pretty
and
dope.
He was known for like living among and being with lepers. And one of the interesting things that would happen over time, there's a lot to his story that I won't go into because we're talking about you, but like people would come to him and say, man, it's so amazing what you do for these lepers. It's so amazing how you love them. It's so amazing how you serve them and you're here for them. And he would be like, you know, you actually don't understand what's going on here because it's the lepers that took me in. It's the lepers that saved my life. It's the lepers that gave me vision. It's the lepers that healed me. It's the lepers that were the presence of God to me. Like I was lost until they took me in.
Yep.
And as you talk about the students finding you, I couldn't help but remember this like Francis story a bit.
And it was also knowing that it was something bigger than me. Yes, I was going through my moment, but I used to teach them, hey, if you're having a bad day, it's not my fault. Don't come in here giving me a bad attitude. You better walk out and come back in a different person, because I don't treat you like that, so don't treat me like that. And I was always human with them and let them know that I'm a real person. So when I was going through a real human moment, they showed up for me. Why? Because it was modeled for them. And I knew that they were taking what they had learned from me and giving it right back to me and giving me what I needed in that moment. And that's what actually got me out of bed every day and went back to work. And
That's
then
seriously powerful.
I feel really crazy that the APC that I hung up on, and I probably didn't talk to her for like another year and a half, but when her husband passed away, I did show up for her, and she whispered in my ear. She was, I am so sorry the way I treated you. And I'm like, it's okay. I forgive you. Don't worry about it. Like, it's okay. Like, now you know you're going through it, so it's okay. Like, and I think that's what, it's hard for people to do that, because it's real easy to be like, well, you treated me like this, but that's how you know when you have growth and that the change is really working in you.
I so appreciate you sharing that story. So another question that I'm trying to ask everybody that we talk to.
Sure.
What are 2 or 3 books that you think everybody here should read?
Okay, so number one, obviously, I'm going to tell everyone the Bible because, like, it really is a powerful book. You don't have to start it at the
That's
very
actually
beginning.
a bunch of books.
Like,
So
it's
you
like,
just
it's
used
like
all your
so
chances.
many
That was-
books right there.
I
right?
recommended 66 books.
Books. Stay away from Exodus. It's very scary. Don't read that one right away. But no, but that has
I'll
been
let
my
you pass
source.
it as one. since
Pass
I
on
asked
that
for
one.
3,
You gotta-
and you recommended 66.
You have
but like,
to, but one that I'm actually is I read it probably once every couple of years is the 4 Agreements. Don Miguel Ruiz. Like it's just it's simple things, and it aligns totally with what I do for a living. What other book? Oh, The Alchemist. That's a banger.
Cabron,
No, Pablo. What is it? Pablo. What's his last
The
name?
Alchemist.
There you go. Yeah, but yes, there you go. Yep, that's it. The
Pablo.
Alchemist.
Escobar. That's what I heard.
Not Pablo Escobar. I don't need you to learn how to cut cocaine, okay? Yes, there it is, Coho. But The Alchemist,
What's great about the recording is they don't hear them.
I love it. They're gonna be like, Julia told everyone to read about cutting coke.
It's tight.
So those the
Okay,
4 Agreements
okay.
and The Alchemist.
4 Agreements, The Alchemist, which, by the way, I think I need to read. I feel like
It's
that's in
amazing
the works,
book.
but I'm like, no, I don't think I read it.
It's a pretty super dope
All
book.
right, I'm doing it. I actually have a flight in the morning.
There you go. Knock
See
it
if I can
out.
pull it up, because that's what I like to do on flights. Okay, so I want to ask you about the most innovative or inspiring person that you've ever met or read about.
So people are probably going to think this is an easy one, but if you know me, you know who I'm going to say. It's my mom. And I'm going to try to say this without crying, but today, I don't even know if she realizes it. 4 years ago today, she walked out of a hospital after battling COVID for 14 days, being on a ventilator, being alone, isolated, everyone telling us, even some of my own siblings telling me, your mom's not coming home, you better start getting ready for it. And my mom is a fighter. When I tell you, and she believes in Jesus, she's a faith believer, but all my faith and the person who has inspired me to never give up in like really tough situations has always been my mom. And today is 4 years that I feel like I always say, and I prayed every single day outside that hospital room when you couldn't even be in the same room as her. And people told me I was crazy. I would sit outside of the hospital room, eat dinner, me and my husband, and we would try to figure out where my mom was at and talk to her in the hospital. And she came out of it. And I know she's so inspiring. And every day after that she has come out of that has been a blessing for me.
I remember talking to your brother Adrian exactly at that time while that was going on, and it was like because 4 years ago today, for those listening on some recording, was like exactly when we were like early into COVID.
In the middle of it.
We were a couple months in, and as far as we know, everybody is fucking dying.
Yep, everybody, yep.
And mom is in there and on a ventilator, and like mom is here tonight, and like what an incredible testimony to your own resilience.
That's right.
And the power of prayer and your families, just like
Absolutely.
and no, that super resonates. I'm really glad you shared that. So I want to ask you another question. What if you could recommend?
I'm so interesting.
What?
I'm so interesting.
Yeah, I love that person. I'm super interesting. So what would you recommend that everybody here, the community, focuses on, everybody listening, the community focuses on, over the next few years that would make the biggest impact in terms of adding beauty and value to the world?
Serve others. It's less about you. When you are really thinking of other people and you are thinking of serving other people and the impact that you make, it's almost like you can replicate it. If I serve this person, and then that person serves the next, and then we do this for the next person, you can make such an impact and such a change. I think sometimes we have become a very selfish society, a very individualistic society. We get into our own heads about what we have, what we don't have. We judge ourselves. I'm too, I could be thinner, I could be healthier. I don't like the way I look. And we focus so much on me, and us. Or I'm financially stable. I need to have enough money in my 401k. When am I going to retire? You can't take any of that stuff with you when you leave here. So I just feel like the one thing that we all can focus on more is serving each other and really listening and communicating with each other. I think a lot of the times people listen to respond versus listening to understand and just hearing what someone else has to say. We're already thinking of the response. We're already thinking of our own answer, our own rebuttal. It's really hard. It's really hard to just sit there and absorb what someone is trying to say. And I think if we listened more, we communicated better, and we served each other and weren't thinking so much about ourselves, we could make a huge impact in this world.
So early in the night, as I read your resume, your bio, and you talked about, I wasn't seeking accolades, I was actually doing something else entirely, and these were a byproduct of that. And then as we kind of come to and I want to open this up to you guys to ask questions, but as we come to the end of like me kind of grilling you, whatever, like,
John came with it, though.
There's something similar about you saying like, it's like not by direct pursuit. There's another thing that you're doing. Like you need to be able to listen and be open and not waiting to respond. There's something else. And I'm just curious, like how would you recommend any of us in any of our pursuits, like approach the journey itself, and like how do you think about, because in the beginning and in the end I feel like you're saying it's not about you.
No.
Well, then what's it about?
I love that. I think when it becomes about you, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Like if it's only about you, I understand that we're trying to, you want to better yourself, you want to become a better human being, but if it's just for me, what is that for? I feel like you can do all of those things, but then sharing that and pushing that out. But I think the one thing where people can start, and it's where I had to start. People will tell you growing up, like I was always ready to like cuss you out, throw down, tell you how wrong you were, prove you wrong. Proving people right or wrong isn't necessarily so important to me anymore. And I think that just trying to create better human beings, because there are a lot of mean people in this world. And our kids are growing up with that. Our kids are growing up thinking that they're not good enough, that they're not enough, and they're hard on themselves. So I just think like where we can start is with yourself, like changing who you are and understanding who you are, and then you're able to model that behavior.
So if I ask the family, that's what she models at home is social stability, emotional
Oh, I'm
stability.
so amazing at home.
Like this is night and day.
I try, it's a struggle.
We do what we can. Okay, so by the way, guys, so we are recording this and they won't be able to hear you. So I want to be able to repeat questions that you'll hear, but like just for the sake of like those listening. But I want to open this up. What did we not cover? Did you hear anything you want to ask about? Do you have any questions? Is there anything we can like let's just open it up. Let's have some dialogue.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Because my cousin and I always have this conversation, and it's about mentors. And you sort of alluded to it at the end of, in your current state. But sometimes we have mentors in our life, and we don't know necessarily early in our life that that's what they were. Tell me, how
So resist the temptation to begin answering. You can think about it. All right, so a lot of us, you talked a little bit, you talked about mentors. And I think at times, this is the question I'm trying to repeat as best I can. At times, there are mentors in our lives, but we don't recognize like actually what's happening. We don't frame them as mentors. Can you tell us about, as far back as you can remember, where someone was shaping you and mentoring you and being that role to you? Good? Okay.
So without realizing it, and now like reflecting, my brother and I are not that far apart in age. And there were a lot of things that he went through before me and I always felt like my mom had 2 sets of children. I mean, my older brother and sister, they're like a 12 and 13-year gap between us. So one of my early mentors was my brother. He wasn't always the nicest. We didn't always get along, and I did not like him half the time growing up. Did not want to listen to him. He's hard-headed and stubborn and all of the good stuff. But he did do a lot of firsts for me. Like, even when I went to HCC and started college, like, he took me with him. I was still a senior in high school, and it was like, see, college is nothing. Like, look at this. And I'm like, this is what it is? And he's like, yeah, you could do this. Like, no big deal. And I finished before him. Just saying. No. But he was always leading me. I think even my mom, I know, will tell me these funny jokes, and I'll say it right now and embarrass him, but I wanted to be so much like my brother that I would mimic everything he did, including trying to pee standing up. Like, I thought I could do exactly what my brother was doing.
When you were young?
When I was like 1 and 2. My mom used to tell me.
When I was at HCC.
Not at HCC. Not at HCC. But my mom used to tell me, she's like, you used to follow him around. You wanted to do everything that he wanted to do. And
Respect.
So he's definitely one of my earliest mentors. But a lot of my teachers have been mentors to me. I speak to them often from my bachelor's, even when I was undergrad at USF, to my master's program, and even people at my job. My friends are some of my mentors. One of my best friends, Maria, she was a young mom. Like, she was pregnant in high school, and your parents were trying to, she's a bad person because she did this, and Maria kept weaseling her way back into my life, and I always knew it was God, like, putting her there for sure. But she has mentored me too, to know that she didn't, go to college, doesn't have a master's, doesn't have all of these degrees and all of that. But she is one of the most loving, giving people that I know, and doesn't have any of the titles to go along with it. So, like, mentors to me, they come in different forms.
It's funny. Such a good question. Thank you for asking me, because this was like so rich. And like, I often will think about, because like I've had examples of like children, little children, speaking truth. And it's a weird scenario to be in, because you're like, bitch, I could punch you across the parking lot. But like, at the same time,
like, what do you really know about
But at the
life?
same time, like, you have to surrender to truth. You have
Absolutely.
to submit to truth. You have to acknowledge truth when it's presented to you. And like, it doesn't matter
Who
who
it's
the
coming
person
from.
is. Like, a mentor could be a 3-year-old, a mentor could be a 5-year-old, a mentor could be all of these people. Like, in a moment's notice,
Yeah.
do you recognize something true when it's said to you?
Yes. And I will give a short example with my son. Might have been a month ago. And we were having just, he's a teenager, just turned 15. And we butt heads all the time. And I tell him sometimes, I go, I think we butt heads a lot because you remind me a lot of your dad, who is my ex-husband, and my brother, who I literally could punch in the face sometimes. So I have this like combination of him. But
I
he
kind of want
also,
to bring him up and do that. But
yeah,
like,
right.
Okay,
We could totally do
moving
that.
on.
But he has a lot of my stubborn qualities as well. So I told him the other day, I go, you're like a mirror to me sometimes. And I go, I think that's why we butt heads so much, because you are asking the questions, you are pushing my thinking, and you're not afraid to do it. And you're not the 5-year-old, the 7-year-old anymore. Like, they have opinions. And I have taught him to be open with how he feels. So it's kind of like, it's what you taught him to do. But he said something to me that really stuck with me, and talk about mentorship. He said, Mom, I would never think of you as someone who struggles with anxiety, who struggles with like social anxiety or fear, or speaking in front of people, because we were having a long talk one day. And he's like, sometimes he goes, Mom, it's like I see you like that Instagram like post that everything is like perfect. Like, I would never think that you struggle with anything. He goes like, I would never. He goes, because I see you that way. And it hit me super hard, because I'm like, people do need to know that you struggle. I'm not perfect. I'm not that, perfect Instagram family, but that's what we put out there, right? Like, no one wants to put out like, man, I had a really shitty day today, and I want to punch my, boss, and my kid talked back to me. Like, no one's posting that stuff. No, but
Nobody.
Like, no one. We're posting our highlight reel. But in that moment, it still let me know I need to let my son know that I struggle.
It's funny, you brought up Jesus earlier, and one of the things that's always stood out to me about him is that he inverted this thing that we do, where he said, like, if you, like, give, do it in secret. If you pray, do it in secret. Basically, if you do good stuff, don't tell anybody.
Like, don't put it out there.
But if you do bad stuff, put it on blast.
Yeah, the opposite.
And that's actually like a really weird thing to us. We're like, yeah, it's not how we work. That's not what we do. But yeah, at the same time, what you're saying is like, hey, actually leading with a limp, being vulnerable in front of the people you lead, saying like, I'm really struggling right now. I'm having a hard time.
Yeah.
Is actually a powerful way to lead with authenticity. Guys, it's still on you. Yeah, here we go.
What can you do to improve personal resiliency in yourself?
All right, so somebody
I love it.
has asked, like, what can I do? What can you do? What can people do to improve personal resiliency in ourselves?
You got to do the work. You got to do the work yourself. You have
Bitch.
It's hard.
Do the work, man.
It's, when you like trying to like keep to like a gym plan and meal prep and doing all that, what you put your time into, you're going to see the results, right? But if you really want to learn how to push through difficult situations and develop and cultivate those skills, you have to practice and you have to model it. And practicing is hard. And I read a lot. I read a lot of different books. I love to read. I write a lot. I like to write. But I think you have, for yourself, you have to find strategies that are going to help you know how to push through those situations. But a lot of it is, I always tell people, the internet. I mean, in ChatGPT, hello, AI. I am like a total fan of AI right now. I'm like, how do I fix this? How do I professionally say I don't like you right now?
You can actually write, by the way, you can write a really furious letter.
Yeah.
Like, bitch, I hate you, and I'm going to kill you, I'm going to choke
In
your
the
mom.
nicest
and then it gives it back, and it's like, respectfully, I disagree. And
I'm like, I would have never said
this is so helpful.
I would have never said it that way. It's usually the skill of like, don't answer an email when you're angry, walk away, right? Now I'm like, ChatGPT, make this and answer this professionally and sound assertive. And it does it for you, right? But just doing the work yourself, like reading, writing, and then practicing it. Finding things that you struggle with. Looking at yourself and saying, okay, hey, I know I struggle with, I'm not a social person, or I don't like being in crowds, or I always have to have the last word. Start reading up on those things and then finding strategies and then practicing them. Because before you can change anybody else, you got to do the work on yourself first.
All right, the knowing yourself thing stands out to me. Are there, because I'm a fan of like, there's a lot of tools out there that I'm a fan of in terms of like self-knowledge.
Self-awareness and.
Are there
yeah.
any specific tools that you recommend, like people could go take? Maybe they pay a small fee to take a test, or maybe there's like something that's free. But like, are there ones that you're like, this is helpful?
So what is it? Oh gosh, I'm gonna forget it. It's the number one.
The numbers, the Enneagram.
The Enneagram.
Yeah, the Enneagram. That's a
Enneagram.
big one. That's a big one. I recommend.
Enneagram helps is a really good one, and then there's I'm forgetting it right now. It's gonna come to me, but it's not. But there's tons of different like self-awareness tests that you can take online that are free. But I think that's where you start. Like when I teach this to students, when I teach this to adults, it all sounds like simple stuff. Like this isn't groundbreaking, news of how to do these things, but we're never taught how to do it. But I think one strategy is write down all the things that you like about yourself. Write down all the things that make you you and that you love about yourself. And what you come to find is that sometimes that list is short, and the list of what are all the things I want to work on, what are the things that I don't like about myself, that list is a whole lot longer.
Oh, we're way better at negative, yeah.
Yeah, like because
We do that with other people
it's
too.
easier
What do I
to accept
not
it.
like about you?
Yeah,
It's a longer
we're going to
list.
take that there. But I think the Enneagram, I think is really good because it kind of gives you an idea of like where you're at and how you think. And then just the simple strategy of making that list of things that make you you and the things that you love and like about yourself, and then do the opposite, the things that you know that you struggle with and that you want to work on, and then work on one of those things every single day.
Yeah, what else we got? Homie's got a question back here.
So I know they're building a brand new school in Waimama, which is called South County now. And it's 87-acre school, high school, and they're looking for a name for it. So what's the name that you think it should be named and make a case for that?
All right, so let me repeat it. So there's a new high school being built in South County, Waimama, and they're looking for a name for this school. And your brother is asking, what is the name that you think it should be given, and can you make a case for that?
So a couple of days ago, I don't know, something was just put on my heart, and why mama? No one ever wanted to talk about the word why mama. It was like, why who, why what, where do you live? And it was always like, people were always embarrassed of what that was. And then now you have lagoons out there and, $500,000 homes, $1 million homes that are out there that weren't made for the people who grew up and were raised and lived there.
Yep.
So like, I think some of the history is being lost there. And one of the names that I had suggested, because my family has been there, like basically, for over 40 years, and there's several families, but my mother just corrected me and said 50, so over 50 years.
50.
But I had suggested our last name, which is Sarmiento,
High. Oh
of
my
course,
God, that would be
right?
amazing.
And much to homage to my mother and my father, but families like my mother's and my father's, like that built roots there, that are they came from, different countries and, lived out the American dream. They came here, they built their own businesses. And so that had been one of my suggestions. It was really on my heart, just to not forget the heartbeat of what the town was representing. And I'm like, if you're not going to name it after a person, then hardcore name it after the city itself. So it preserves that namesake, because for Ruskin, for example, we want to rebrand it as South Shore, and because it sounds better, and Waimama Village, and all of these different things that are happening. So I think for me, it would be either advocating for a name that people respect in that community, which I knew my mother and my father are very well respected. The Sarmiento name is respected in that community, and not only in the community, but in education. And although they were not the traditional educators, they were our first teachers, and that's
Yeah.
who made us, who we are, or name it after the town. But I know that's going to be a big, heavy topic, and whoever wins that battle, let's see how that rolls out.
I think we had another question over here. Oh, you're done. That was the same question. We got one right here. Let's go.
So I'm a current teacher in the classroom, and I run like robotics and things like that, and my kids are so afraid to fail. So like, what did you do in the classroom, or what do you suggest to help like foster resilience in our students?
Hold on.
I'm going to hold on.
So she's a teacher in the classroom today, and her students she teaches a lot with like robotics, and her students have a real fear of failure, and it creates a real obstacle for them. And how are you addressing that?
How did she address it, or like?
How would I
when
address
you were
it?
in the classroom, or like, what do you suggest like current teachers?
What do you suggest current teachers do, and how have you addressed that?
I love that question because it's something that I have to remind myself to do, is you have to celebrate the little wins. Even when the whole thing may fail, right? But they got one piece of it right. Celebrate that. We're taught we have to celebrate the big win. But it is those little wins along the way that, like I had a student that was absent almost every single day. When they finally showed up, oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're here today, and make them feel like it's the best day of their life. Like, what is wrong with this lady? But they knew you cared. So even if part of that robotics lesson, they may not get the whole thing right, and they may not get the grade that they wanted, but celebrate the little wins along the way, because we're so focused on the big picture, we miss the little wins that can give them that support that they need. Because if we're constantly telling them what they're not doing well, that's what they're going to focus on. Try to find the little wins.
I think we have one more question over here.
So if you could give the youth influential leader that you consider resilient, who would you recommend to follow?
So if you could give the youth an influential leader that you would recommend following, who would you recommend?
As a resilient element.
Like as a resilient, like this is the model, this is the person, this is the one we're looking at.
Outside the Bible.
Out and not in the
Outside the
Bible,
Bible.
and not
Can't
in the
be
Bible.
Jesus.
She's like, eliminate the Bible.
He
Yeah,
knows.
outside
He's
of that.
taking me away from him.
Thank you for that.
I know this is going to sound really crazy, but my homeboy Biden is not giving up. Like, homeboy shows up, almost asleep, can't even answer some of the questions. You're talking about someone who's resilient. There is someone who is not giving up. They're like, you need to stop. You need to retire. You need to sit down. Homeboy's like, nope, not today.
It's a
I'm
little-
not saying
it's a
follow
little-
his
it's a little
political
weird, right?
agenda. It's a little weird, but if you...
No,
homeboy
true.
But
He's like,
when
I'm
I
here,
think of like
I'm
right
here.
now, like just, I'm not saying follow Biden's political agenda. It has nothing to do with politics, but he has not given up. Like some people are like, sit down. I'm getting text messages all the time. Would you take Kamala as the presidential, person? Would you take this person? And they're like trying to get him to sit down. And there's something in him that is like, nope, I'm half coherent, can barely stand up. I probably took 3 Xanax, but I'm here. And I think that, I know it's funny and it sounds crazy, but that is what you want to see in people, that you want to see them that they're not going to give up. I mean, you got to know when to lay your cards down, right? You got to know when to back away from it. But I think as far as like seeing someone that has continued to push through when people have told him to sit down already, he's like an example that's in the spotlight right now that is standing out to me. I don't know if it's the best, but he is someone I'm thinking of.
I really appreciate you being with us tonight. I know you take your time seriously and what you give it to, and I know you haven't said yes to a lot of the public interview type things where you've been requested before, so I'm super grateful to you for saying yes to this.
What would I tell you? You were special
You said you should feel pretty special, and I
And
said
you-
I feel pretty,
and special.
and I feel special.
I'm like, that's right, John.
So this made me feel pretty and special. And I'm really grateful for this time tonight. I know we got to kind of wrap it up. We're going to close it down here. Thank you so much to Blind Tiger. Thank you guys for hosting us. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.